Hey, Shani from SpeedCubeReview.com. So I just got back from MCC Gamma 2017. This video is probably going to take a little while to get out because I want to film a couple solves so you can see that. But what I want to talk about is the FMC attempt. Now, it wasn't the best attempt. I had a 38, which is actually my worst I've ever done at a competition, the few times I've actually done it. But there were some interesting things that happened. One thing that I've never seen or didn't, it was a really extreme example. So for example, what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to kind of do a walkthrough solve. Now, if FMC is new to you, which is fewest moves, then definitely check out the playlist in the description that goes through it. If you don't care to look at that 10-part series and just want to follow along, go for it. The first time I ever watched someone talk about an FMC solve, I got very lost. It looked cool, but I had no idea what was going on. So just a warning, there's some stuff I'm going to be talking about. One thing is going to be NISS, N-I-S-S. And I utilized NISS. I used it a lot in this, and I did a lot with edge orientation. Actually, no, I didn't do a lot with edge orientation, but that was part of what I used it for. It wasn't just for finding the best pair, but when I got towards that last layer, towards the end of the first two layers, I guess, I decided which one to do based on how I could orient edges. I had a huge cancellation, and actually up until just about 20 minutes ago when I reconstructed the solve, I thought the cancellation was from NISS, but it wasn't. It was just my last little pair for F2L ended up canceling a lot of move for COLL. So for example, I was at F2L -1 in 16 moves. Then I finished F2L in 24 moves total. I did a COLL that should have been 11 moves, ended up only adding 4. Because it canceled out a ton of stuff. When I saw that happening, I couldn't quite believe it. And then what happened is I tried checking it, and for 10 minutes out of the 60, I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. I tested it again, checked everything, tested again, and I finally figured out what the issue was. So I'm going to go through also an issue to watch out for. If you're using NISS, one thing you need to make sure you do. So by the end of, all I had left was a U-perm at 28 moves. I had like 4 minutes left. I tried really quickly to find an insertion, but I just didn't have time. And so I threw in a U-perm at the end, plus a U2. So I ended up with a 38 instead of the 28, which was right before that U-perm. So that's that. I'm going to kind of go through that now. So I'm going to turn the camera around right at the desk and we'll walk through that together. Okay, so I'm going to put the scramble right in the video right here so you can follow along, and I'll kind of walk you through what I do. Now, my sheet for FMC kind of looks really crazy. This is my notes for it. First thing I do is I write the inverse of the scramble, and the reason is that I could do the scramble in reverse, but I feel like if I write it out once, I can just do it much faster. Plus, it'll be less possible to make a mistake. So this was a scramble at first, and there was actually a few different options, and I found a 3-move 2x2x1 block on the inverse and this regular one. But I was most happy with that one. Now the next thing I also did, so after I got that, what I did then, because I couldn't find anything that worked, I was trying to make either a pseudo block or a 2x2x1 block. And what I do every time is you get 3 puzzles. I'm going to have a bunch of different puzzles out, but you get 3 puzzles. And what I do is I do the regular scramble and the inverse. And anytime I get to a step where I feel like I'm happy with how it is, or I just feel stuck, I do the regular and the inverse and see both options and see which one works. So I got to here, and actually I think I did the 2x2x1 block on the inverse as well. But I did this and I did the regular and the inverse. And so, with using the inverse, I got a little bit closer to making a 2x2x2 block, but I still wasn't quite set up with it. So, for example, the moves I did here then to get this set up, let me reverse this a little bit. So when I just do the inverse scramble with those 3 moves, the L2D R prime. So I inverse those, so I do R, D prime, L2, and then I do the inverse scramble. So like I said, I go over this in my FMC tutorial, but I take those 3 moves I did, the L2D R prime, and I inverse them. So I do R, D prime, L2, and then I do the inverse scramble. And that leaves me with this. So you can see actually how these are quite similar. I've got that block here and I've got that block here. So you're always going to have something really similar on the inverse. And with that, with just 3 moves then, I was able to bring that piece up. I then did a D2 to bring that over. And then just before I finished, I brought that down because it was really easy to bring that down. I felt I got kind of stuck again. I tried a lot of different things. So I took this and I did the regular scramble. So what I did was I took the R prime D2 F and I inversed that. So I've got the regular scramble right now is F prime D2 R, the scramble, and then L2 D R prime. And that leaves you with this. And you can see again how this looks very similar to that. And so I messed around with this for a little bit, and I ended up finding this solution because I wanted to bring this over, and what I needed was the red and green corner right here. So what I did was first U2, L2, and that paired that up, and then U, L2, which brought it down, and then D, and that paired up that block. So now I've got that 2 by 2 by 3 block. And again, I got a little bit stuck, so I did the inverse of that to see what that would come up with. So now once you do the inverse of that, so throwing in those moves we just did, so reversing that, which would be D prime, L2, U prime, L2, U prime, those first 3 moves we did for that original 2 by 2 by 1 block, the R, D prime, L2, the inverse scramble, and then the few inverse moves that we did, which would be the R prime D2F, we get this. So we did the inverse of everything. Again, it's a little confusing. That's what those FMC tutorials are. That was your warning. So from here, I found a really easy way to insert this edge here. Those are already paired up, so it's just U2, and then F, U prime, F prime. And now we've got F12 minus 1. At this point, I was not happy with the way this looked, and I didn't really like the way it ended after I inserted it. So I went forward again. So for example, just to show you how I would get there also, I would first do the inverse moves we did. So the ones we just did, the inverse of that, I've got F, U, F prime, U2, L2. Those other 3 inverse moves, so F prime, D2, R. Then I have the scramble, and then those first 3 moves we did, which were the L2, D, R prime. And then the ones we just have for the U2, L2, U, L2, D. And now we have our F2L minus 1. And this pair was much nicer to insert. I've got this blue and orange right here. So I just paired that up and put that in. And that gave me F2L in 24 moves. Now from here, I knew this COLL case, and this is where things got really interesting. Now just to kind of show that I was able to insert that pair more easily, keeping edges oriented from what I did before. So I don't remember exactly where those were in the solves, but I remember utilizing that throughout. But this is where things get really interesting. For the COLL case, I know this algorithm. I usually do it with those bars on the right side, but I'll keep it right here. So this COLL algorithm, I have L, U, L prime, U, L, U, R prime, U, L prime, U prime, R. And I was hoping that would solve it, but it left me with a U perm. And I was really happy with that, so I wrote that down. And this is what I got. The moves we have just before then, from the U prime, L, U, L prime, U2, L, U prime, L prime. And then the new ones, L, U, L prime, U, L, U, R prime, and so forth. I noticed the L prime and the L cancel out. So if you think of it like addition, a prime being a negative and a regular being a positive, L and L prime cancel out. And then I realized U prime and U cancel out. And then I realized L and L prime cancel out. And then here, U2 and U kind of cancel out. They add up, so you can call that a U3 or a U prime. So I was able to take out 7 letters right there. And that made the COLL go from being 11 moves down to 4. Once I got to here, this is where the big mistake came in. So the next step would be to find an insertion. So instead of just solving a U-perm, finding a place to insert that U-perm so it's less moves. Mainly getting it so you're doing just a simple where you have a piece here, here, and here, and that you can do much fewer moves. But here's where that mistake came in, because you want to kind of solve it all together. That way you can see what it looks like. So I threw all those together, looking at this saying, oh, I just have a U permutation left. And this is what the cube looked like. So I first scrambled it up. And then the solution, I first did those 3 moves for that 2x2x1 block. And then the moves for that 2x2x3 block. And then the moves for F2L and the COLL. And then the moves that we had for the inverse. So this is the ones from the 2x2x2 block. Sorry, I meant the F2L minus 1. Now it's the ones for the 2x2x2 block. And I got this. And I couldn't figure out where I went wrong. I mean, it seems like there's some things that are correct, but some things are just totally off. And I messed with this for like 10 minutes. And then it finally hit me. What I forgot to do was add in the U2. Because you want the cube solved except for those 3 pieces, and not just this. And I don't know why I didn't realize it, but that made such a big difference, and that's where everything kind of changed. So from there, I'm going to grab one more puzzle. Okay, so now that we know that we need to do a U2 move, let's throw that in where it needs to be in the solution. So first, let's scramble this up one more time. First, we have the moves that were in that 2x2x1 block, the L2D R prime. Then we have the moves that were in that 2x2x3 block, which were the U2, L2, U, L2, D. Then we have the moves that were in the F2L and the COLL. So we have the U prime, L, U, L prime. Here's that U prime where everything else is canceled out. Then we have L, U, R prime, U, L, U prime, R. Here's where we need to insert that U2 move. And now we have the moves that are from that inverse, so the F2L minus 1. So we have F, U, F prime, U2, L2. And then the 3 moves from the first 2x2x2 blocks. We have F prime, D2, R. And now we're left with the 3 edges where there would be if we didn't do anything after that. Now from here, I could not find a good commutator within the about 4 minutes I had left, so I just threw in a U permutation at the end. But that's sort of the step-by-step, and what I really want to show here is 2 things. One, the insane amount of cancellations. It's not just finding the best solution, but also finding ways to eliminate other moves. Now this was a complete accident, and I did not expect it at all, so don't think that I planned any of that, but that's one thing to look out for. The other one is if you're using NISS, and let's say you get to the very end and you have a corner or an edge commutator that you could see, like a U-perm or A perm, make sure you have that move in place and it's completely solved and not something like this. That's a big mistake that I think I've made before in practice as well. So thank you very much. That was kind of a walkthrough solve for my FMC attempt. Like I said, the full thing was 38 moves, but we got all the way to the U-perm in 28, so I'm pretty happy with that. So thank you very much. Leave your thoughts and questions in the comment section below. Hit like, subscribe for more content like this in the future, and as always, stop by speedcubeview.com for more news and reviews.